We don't just want to be known as the app that sells a specific type of insurance, because I think the idea of a policy is actually a very unnatural thing for humans.
Traditional insurance companies play with fear a lot, and they try to sell insurance products based on fear.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Homescreen. Today I'm going to be speaking to the German insurtech company Getsafe. This is a really fascinating product, as you're about to see. I'm going to be speaking to Patrick and David, who are product and design people respectively, about how they go about creating a product which is kind of very differentiated from its market, really because it's based on a notion of empathy, more so than anything to do with the traditional sort of mechanisms around gathering insurance. We're going to take a look at a rebranding exercise that they've just recently undertaken, which looks really slick, a purchase journey to show how they've gone about actually allowing people to very quickly generate a purchase of insurance policies, and then also the ability to share that policy or share access to that policy with loved ones. It's all part of this sort of greater narrative around empowerment that they're really pushing, and we think this is a really fascinating discussion. Enjoy. Patrick, David, welcome to Homescreen. A few questions to kick off with just before we get into the specifics of the product's functionality, but can you tell us a little bit about yourselves in turn and how you ended up getting involved with Getsafe? Patrick, we'll start with you.
Okay, yeah, sure. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting us. So my story is one about love. My girlfriend is German, and I met her in Australia while we were diving the Great Barrier Reefs.
Wow.
And so we were long distance for a year and a half. Back then I worked for Uber, and we decided not to be long distance anymore. And she looked around the Heidelberg area and found Getsafe, and then I applied for a job. So she actually got me the job, and then when I got the job, I moved here, and that's why I'm in Heidelberg, and that's how I got to Getsafe.
Brilliant, that's amazing. And David, I understand you're in Frankfurt, so a little bit further away, but go ahead. Yeah.
So it's also quite funny because originally I'm from around like the area of Heidelberg. So my hometown is like 20 minutes away. But yeah, due to personal reasons, I moved to Frankfurt. I think a month before I started my job with Getsafe. Before Getsafe, I've been working with a couple of really early stage startups. Consulting founders with their strategy and vision and stuff, tinkering around with my own little startup, and then eventually started with Getsafe. I think 2 years back now. Yeah,
Sounds brilliant. And Patrick, you hinted there a little bit about your sort of previous experiences, but you were working for Uber. How long have you been sort of involved in the technology scene, I guess, over on that side of the world, and what were you sort of doing over there?
Yeah, so I studied computer science and business in Seattle. I graduated with my master's in 2010, and I've been kind of in tech since then. I've been in product for basically all of my career. Started out working for Redfin, which is a real estate brokerage. It's comparable to Purplebrick in the UK.
Yep.
And just working on technology for both real estate agents as well as buyers and sellers in the real estate space. And then moved to Uber and worked on driver onboarding and streamlining that process, which in London is a very hard thing to do, actually. One of the most important markets for driver onboarding. And then, just kind of kept going with my career to kind of develop more toward a team leadership type position, and always, even when I was at Uber, wanted to be the head of product at a startup. And I think, when life gives you a girlfriend plus career and those two things kind of align, you just kind of jump at it.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up where I am now.
That's fantastic. And so for each of you, so Patrick, you are a head of product, and David, you're a product designer. So what sort of what individual sort of experiences prepared you for this particular facet of each of your individual roles? So for example, how does a head of product with previous experience at companies like those that you mentioned approach something like insurtech? And David, same for you. How have you kind of primed yourself for getting involved in the insurtech side of things from a product design perspective? Start with you, Patrick.
Yeah, sure. So I think having worked in product management and worked on products for consumers, starting first in real estate and second in mobility, kind of laid a good foundation for me in terms of like understanding problem solving and understanding collaboration and working with teams of different disciplines. And the really cool thing about product management as a discipline is that it's highly, highly transferable, because at the end of the day, all you're doing is understanding a problem and getting a team to go solve it. And so from that perspective, super cool. I had the opportunity to also manage a small team at Redfin, and that taught me some of the basics in terms of like people management, and got the chance to go through management training and all that stuff. And I think that's really helped me immensely in my current role, because I'm managing many more people than I ever have before. But I think it's really nice that the foundation was already there. Yeah, David, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I think what Patrick mentioned about being transferable applies also to the role of product design, because like when I started my studies back then, it was design school with a focus on interactive media and product design. And after that, as I mentioned before, I went through a couple of early stage startups with a lot of different backgrounds. It was in the space of home tech, and I think like the important thing here is that solving problems is always at the core of things, and you can apply it for different industries.
Sure. And I think there's something really interesting whenever I speak to people who've been involved in sort of organizations like Uber, or like, smaller startups, or maybe consultancy roles where they're working on a range of different styles of product. It sort of lends them the ability to sort of gather inspiration, maybe from a design pattern, design language perspective, from the previous, examples. We have, like in the UK, we have Monzo, for example, and their CEO will wax lyrically about how much he learned from being the head of product or the vice president of growth at a dating app site in New York. Like, so for example, the bringing in of these different sort of experiences and design languages often inform the product that we're building from, financial, or in your case, insurance perspectives. Interesting that a company like Getsafe is coming from Heidelberg. I'm not too familiar with Heidelberg. When one thinks of German financial services, insurance, that sort of thing, we think of Frankfurt, as you mentioned before, David, and also, with the obvious candidates like N26 and so on. We think of Berlin as well as the sort of like the great tech centers. Why did Getsafe seem to be born out of this sort of like Heidelbergian culture, if you will? What if we're not ascribing it too much grandioseness there? Why Heidelberg?
I think the simple answer is that both our founders live here. But I think, to be honest, that there's actually quite a bit going on in this area. I mean, if we look at kind of the whole like southwestern Germany region from, Stuttgart all the way up to Frankfurt, we have companies, we have the financial center in Frankfurt. We have companies like Daimler and Bosch. We have Waldorf is just 20 minutes drive from Heidelberg, which is SAP, which is I think Europe's largest tech company. We have a number of really good universities in both business, tech, as well as actually design in the areas. So from like a talent perspective and in terms of like industry, I think this is actually a really good region to be in to start a company. And perhaps we don't kind of brag about ourselves enough, because I think people don't generally see the region as one that's anything kind of like techie. But I think there's actually, if you look beneath the covers, quite a bit going on. And there are certain advantages and disadvantages that come with being in the area and not being in Berlin. And I think it's always kind of a trade-off. I wouldn't say it's strictly better or worse. David, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just one quick thing. That is that like the area that you were describing is also like labeled as like a metropolitan area, like that spans from Frankfurt down to the southern part, which would be then Stuttgart. And I think like this is super interesting because there's a huge exchange of different things, knowledge, but also people and ideas. And yeah, I think this is a strength, but at the same time, we are challenged with being a small place and nothing too shiny that people admire to work with when they're starting their career and stuff, you know.
It sounds pretty similar to in the UK. We have a pretty similar sort of regional divide. On the one hand, we have London, which provides a lot of the sort of financial fintech infrastructure, but then there are small pockets of sort of areas which don't obviously have the same sort of structure that you're talking about there. You know, you mentioned some really great companies like Bosch and SAP that exist there. But, you know, for example, we have Durham here in the UK, which is where we have a few quite well-known fintechs such as Atom Bank and Honcho, who play in the insurtech space and other things like that. So sometimes just by virtue of the fact that there are founders who want to live around there, then this sort of like flourishes and grows from within it, which is quite fascinating. But on the Getsafe point specifically, what does the product do for those who are not initiated, and what are you sort of what are the sort of marquee features that you're offering?
Yeah, so I think at a high level, we're trying to empower all of our customers to live life to the fullest. And we really see insurance as a tool that helps people do that. And I think David will talk about this a little bit more later, because it's like a core part of the new brand that we're rolling out. And so from like a product perspective, that means we don't just want to be known as the app that sells a specific type of insurance, because I think the idea of a policy is actually a very unnatural thing for humans. It's this arbitrary grouping of scenarios that like you're covered against if something bad happens to you. And so the end goal for us then is to kind of solve the idea of risk rather than solve the idea of policies. And so our product is basically trying to understand, kind of based on people's life situation, how they want to live, what kind of gotchas they should know about, what areas of their life needs certain types of protection or not, and helping them make an informed decision so that they know what kind of coverage they need. And then our app is kind of there to be the one-stop shop to provide all those benefits at once. That's kind of the vision. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so it's like a more of a high-level approach to it. I think that's quite interesting. It's something that I've heard before, actually, from a travel company that we have, a travel fintech, an insurtech company called Pluto. The reason why I sort of slipped there and said travel companies, because that's kind of what they wanted to be affiliated with more. The notion being that in order to offer a wider suite of products, insurance is just one version, one sort of part of the package that comes into, you know, having a more holistic view of how you do travel. And so it sounds like there's a similar approach there with you guys, where, you know, the insurance element provides one lens through which to sort of help people to understand the risk and also their approach to how they're living their lives at home or something like that. Would that be a fair assessment? Yeah,
and I think kind of tying back to one of your questions earlier, having worked in kind of real estate and mobility, I kind of always took for granted this luxury that, like, you know, people always need a place to live, and some people just want to buy a home sometimes, or like people always need a way to get around, and this kind of demand is extremely natural to our daily lives. And I think for insurance, this was something that I very quickly learned that is not necessarily the case. Like, nobody gets up in the morning and just wants to launch their insurance app and buy a policy. And so I think if we really take like a customer-centric approach to designing an insurance product and an experience around these contracts and these piles of paper, it's got to look like something that's a little bit more bridging the gap there, which is like, you're not you're not going to wake up in the morning and care about, your insurance contract, but what do you care about? You care about maybe, starting that job that is your first time working full time, or moving out of your parents' place for the first time and trying to find your own place. Like things like that, I think generally correlate well with insurances, because insurance needs evolve with life. And this is kind of one of the core directions that we've been exploring around a lot, is how do we inject ourselves into the equation in a way that's relevant to people kind of on a more natural basis, rather than kind of assuming that they just need insurance to begin with. And I think in specifically in our kind of millennial digital native population, people I think really don't understand or know that they need insurance at all. And so this is an interesting challenge from our perspective.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that our company deals with quite a lot, especially from a consultancy perspective. And David, I'm sure that you might have experience from a consultancy end when you were speaking to customers from a design perspective about how they best approach this sort of challenge of designing a proposition that's not just based around a financial product, but takes a more holistic approach. We use a methodology called Jobs to be Done, which is the Clayton Christensen Harvard Business School thing, and sort of forms the core part of the consultancy practice at 11FS. The idea being that you go and you find out what sort of tools a user is renting in order to get a specific job done. For example, if you're to use the idea of the McDonald's milkshake, people might compare that to a chocolate bar, or people might compare it to something that they use on a long drive to and from work in order to get full. I guess, you might, from a design perspective, David, have a more have thinking like that you're trying to apply to insurance?
Yeah, like when talking to customers, one thing is pretty clear from the beginning on always. People know that they have to take care of this topic, right? But it's a scary topic, and I think what's important on our side is to make crystal clear, people are interested in what's covered and especially what's not covered, so that they can form a better understanding for the whole product. And we really try to empower people with different features to enhance their decision-making process.
And so just we'll talk a little bit about the insurtech market a little, but I wanted to sort of touch on the redesign that we're going to be talking about today. Just from a high level, we'll take a look at some of the design language and the interactions of that redesign. But could you talk a little bit about what drove that redesign from your perspective? What sort of core messaging are you trying to put out there at the minute, and how does that speak to the wider sort of goal of the company?
Yeah, so I think the whole process was motivated by our inner belief that we have the status quo a year ago was something that was working, but that was also growing historically over time. And I think there were initiatives in the past that tried to focus more on the story that we like to tell, especially from product side. But eventually at the end of the year, we got the commitment, the company-wide commitment for this process, and then we kicked it off. And I think what the core is that we try to turn inside out with all that we show right now and the whole messaging. I think this is the first time that we actually are able to communicate what we feel inside forever. And I think this is a huge chance moving forward, because we felt really comfortable with the product on its own, and the whole foundation that we built during the last couple of years. But we also at the same time felt that we lacked a bit on the whole emotional side of things. And I think that we, with the whole process now, are at the level that we can feel comfortable with showing who we are and really also getting the message across.
Okay. And what were the core messages that you're trying to get across from that?
Yeah, so I think Patrick mentioned it initially already. It's about empowerment. It's about living your life, but also it's at the same time, because traditional insurance companies play with fear a lot, and they try to sell insurance products based on fear. And we're not trying to not talk about risks and potential damages and stuff, but we're trying to do it in a kind of playful way, right? So we're accepting that there are little mistakes that can come with your life, and but we're here for you. So this is kind of the core message. And also it's about empowering the people for them to feel their own like strength in life, and to because like we're dealing with growing ups, right? Young people that are going through super wild and interesting phases in their life, and we're trying to empower them to explore the life and build their own life that they will live like in future.
Okay, and this presumably will set you apart from a lot of your competitors at least in the German side of the market. What are the who are those players typically, and what do they do? What do you do that they don't specifically? Patrick, would you like to answer this?
You mean Germany specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like David said, a common positioning in insurance is fear-driven, and so from that positioning, insurance is kind of viewed as a protection, kind of like an armor. Whereas like empowerment is something that's within, right? It's the moment where you there's a difference between kind of like putting on a lot of armor versus like just knowing that you're going to get into this and it's just going to be a part of the experience for some things to go wrong, and it's okay. And I think that kind of positioning and that kind of holistic approach in terms of solving risk is not something that you see a lot of in Germany or anywhere else. I think in Germany we have a few players like Koya, like Lemonade is here as well now, and a really big one is called One or WeFox. They're kind of the same company. I think across all three of those competitors, we have a slightly different messaging, especially with the new brand. And I think also in terms of product line, we very much focus more around offering all the products that our customers need as quickly as possible, rather than starting in like a carrier route where like Koya and Lemonade are both kind of going the direction of more, I want to reinvent insurance as at the core and what it means to have an insurance product, whereas we're more focused on reinventing the experience around insurances for now. Now, if you search around kind of the news, you'll see that we also apply to be a carrier already with BaFin, the authority here in Germany. So our long-term version, we definitely see that a lot of potential can be unlocked by being a carrier and creating our own insurances, but we kind of have to pick our battles, and we believe that the kind of lower hanging fruit there is really around the experience of insurance, and that there are a lot of things broken there, even without kind of rewriting the contracts.
And actually, like the positive thing about that is that people really appreciate having it all in one place. I think this is something to highlight here, because this is actually a real differentiator to the German competitors, at least.
Sure. So you guys will broker between the insurance provider and the individual in that regard, rather than being, as you mentioned, the carrier, so actually providing the insurance. It's an interesting one, because I guess that's one of the things that we've seen a lot in the market is people's wrestling with the desire to either be the broker or to be the provider of the package, and actually have or carry the risk on their own books. Most of the more successful ones that we've seen have been able to sort of work with that broker position, and knowing that they can provide the UI layer or the sort of the interface on top that makes the people feel comfortable, rather than worrying too much about the logistics of carrying sort of like that insurance financial risk on their own balance books. So I guess that quite nicely leads us on to taking a look at the rebrand. This is a landing page view, I guess. So we've got this really nice sort of set of visuals here with essentials, a list of different sort of coverage that you can get. And then on the left here, an image interspersed with a bit of information on the right hand side there about the sort of the types of cover that you can get, explaining some of the sort of like the reasoning behind some of the features that are on the app, that sort of thing. Talk to us a little bit about the sort of the design language there. Why did we decide to go for a few of those different patterns, and what were you trying to convey there?
Yeah, so I think the new brand is at its best like when you see the sum of all of its parts, which would be the strong typography that we have chosen, the colorful range of new colors, because like in the back it's also interesting to compare it a bit, because we've been only black and white for almost a year now. And definitely like we developed like a visual language also for photography that should put people, it should be relatable for people, situations out of your life. We were playing around with the perspective of the actual damage. Like imagine you drop your phone and then take a picture from the perspective of the phone, like, you know, stuff like that are really relatable. And the other really important part is the actual like copywriting, storytelling, and messaging part. I think this is also the first time that we really have been utilizing the strengths of our copywriting team, and we're trying to speak a language that our millennial target group can really grasp and understand, and we're trying to do it in a.
And I guess you're trying to do this across two different locations as well, right? Because this is both a British product and a German product from that perspective, which
yes.
We've seen, for example, the N26 particularly had a lot of difficulty navigating the cultural differences between the UK and Germany when they first launched here about a year and a half ago or so, whereby the messaging just wasn't landing for their English users in the same way, which must pose quite an interesting challenge. So when you were doing the design for this, what sort of like processes did you go through in order to land on that specific sort of design language? And I guess you've done this all in-house yourselves. So how did you sort of find the right balance of skills to get you to where you needed to be in the end?
Yeah, I think like it's interesting that you highlighted the different markets, especially because luckily we recently hired a native speaker like from UK who is also like within the target group himself, and really understands the culture. And I think this is definitely a big one for us. But at the same time, we have our German copywriting and concept team. I don't know how to put it, but our setup during this whole process was that we were building concepts with copywriting and design hand in hand, and I think this really enhanced the whole experience because during the design process we really tied together the visual language but also the written word, and I think it shows during the whole experience. When we talk especially about the landing page, it starts off with like a crispy like brand pitch in a way, where we try to get people in the mood, what we're all about, trying to get the core message across. And then we had two different things that we want to talk about in general. One is like how can people really quickly find the needed insurance, the coverage that they are looking for, because we know that there are two kinds of customers in a way. One that already knows what he wants, the other one that probably needs a bit more consultancy around it. But still, like one of our goals was to enable people to like quickly find coverages and get all of the information that they probably need. And when you scroll down a bit, and this is what you don't see in this video snippet, is that we talk more about like how can we help you with the different features, with the app, with the product in general. And this ties back to what you were saying about jobs to be done in a way, because we're highlighting like different parts of the whole experience, and using this as like the anchor for people to get excited about the product.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's an interesting dynamic to strike, whereby you've got to do a little bit of concierging for people who don't quite know what they need insurance-wise, or want either. And then those who just want to get to the core experience of getting the coverage they need and feeling secure in that regard. In terms of like that design language, obviously it's been designed to be a motive for your core message around empowering people. How will that sort of be conveyed within the app itself? Are you planning to keep the app with its current sort of very crisp white design language, and keep the landing pages as sort of the more decorative, more sort of like visually intriguing piece of kit there? Or how is there a plan to transfer that language over to the app as well?
Yeah, it's a good observation from your side. We had conversations and discussions around that during the last month quite a lot. I think our vision here is that yes, like everything that is outwards communicative, like the website or ads and campaigns, can be really loud and emotive. Yeah. We're trying to bridge this feeling into the app as well, but the app still is the place where people can restore their peace of mind in a way, right? It's the place where people can file claims and get back their money, like in case of damage. So it is a bit more direct from the interaction in general. But still, we're picking up these visual parts of the new brand and incorporating them in the app as well. So you won't feel lost as a customer, like going through our buying flows, ending up in the app. You will still, feel like, okay, this is Getsafe.
Okay, cool. And Patrick, just from your end, what the brief here, the design brief, or maybe the business brief, if there was a way to convey the two together, how would you typically think about the output of this sort of design exercise, and what were you looking to get out of it, if it's anything different from what David's mentioned there?
Yeah, I mean, I think holistically, it's a bunch of things for us. I think from a design perspective, it's a whole new set of tools we can use to convey certain emotions and messages. Mm-hmm. I think from like a business perspective, it's going to be a huge key differentiator for us with our competitors, especially as InsurTech really keeps going on its ramp up into kind of the more and more investment, more and more companies popping up here and there. Yeah. And so I think for us, the realization that we're about empowerment and not necessarily protection was a really, really important realization. From like kind of like unit economics perspective, it's also like really hard for a startup to, bid against keywords or kind of like fight dollar for dollar against some of the incumbents, right? And so we really needed also to think of ways to be more creative in terms of how we kind of break through the noise and reach our customers. And we really believe that the team did a really good job kind of like creating these patterns and these languages and these colorful ads that are really kind of bold, can grab the attention of people that are maybe looking for something that's a little bit different than the traditional offering, and the messaging that a lot of other companies are using. So right. I think it's going to be transformative in how we do business and how we talk to our customers, and as well as how we build products going forward.
Awesome. And so on that note, I guess we better take a look into the product itself. So we've got a few journeys here to look at. The first one will be actually purchasing the insurance itself. So hopefully we can all see that now. So on this, we have the sort of safe space homepage, and this is an article view. We've got a top nav there, which includes sort of a series of buttons. And then on here, insurance details about specific coverage. We've got extensions below there as well, which is really nice. And then a list of what sort of bits of information are covered within there, which can be expanded, I guess, by these downward facing arrows as and where necessary. And then other information as to what's not included, equally important, I guess, to be clearly represented. No claims here, so be able to calculate an offer, based on the geography. I guess there's some sort of geolocation element there, or maybe certain postcodes have a different sort of requirement from an insurance perspective. And then we can move into the sum that's insured there. So what are you trying to really convey here from what's the important information to be gathering on these pages?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think the spirit of what we try to do is to bring insurance up to speed in terms of matching the expectations of the new kind of on-demand, instant gratification, on-the-go movement. And I know these words have been around for a while, but insurance just isn't quite there yet. And so when we design these experiences, we're trying to make it as fast and easy and intuitive as possible for our customers, right? And so the questions there that we're asking are pretty much the minimum set that are required to actually underwrite the insurance policy.
Yeah.
And so what that means is probably it affects, the price or whether you get accepted or rejected as an applicant to get the insurance policy, and kind of the bare minimum to then create an account and pay for the policy itself.
And we're going to agree to a key set of functions, and we're done. We've got a feedback loop here as well there, which is, I always think, a really good harbinger of how a company's approaching feedback. For example, if there is a rating area at the end to say, you've just completed a function, now give us some feedback as to how that went. There's no more immediate sort of high quality contextual feedback than that, which is quite nice. So in terms of the purchase themselves, you've gone about gathering and prioritizing the gathering of information in a certain way. What's the surplus information? Where do these requirements come from? You mentioned there that there is a broker element to what you do. So you're, I guess, filtering, sorting through maybe one or two different policies and seeing which one is best suited to the user. Where do the requirements come from? How did you go about deciding what information was necessary there? And you've touched there on how much is required from a design perspective, but from the business angle is always an interesting question as to how much information does the provider or the coverer need?
Yeah, and I think that's a really kind of nuanced thing, which is that we mentioned earlier the broker versus carrier thing, and the really important thing to know about Getsafe is that we're actually somewhere in between. It's called an MGA, Managing General Agent, which means that we get to control the customer experience without being a carrier, and also like brand the insurance products that we can sell. What that means is we have an agreement with certain carriers, and the carrier can be different based on which product line it is. And now in the demo you just showed is the UK version of the app, and in the UK we recently only launched, so we have only one product in the UK. But in Germany we're up to 6 products or even more now, and each of those can be a different carrier. And so to come back to kind of that experience, the questions that get asked are pretty much requirements from the partner carrier we work with for that specific product, because they often have specific requirements in terms of what data they need to price or to check validity or whatever it is they need to decide to underwrite or not a specific contract.
Okay. And from a trust perspective, how does it work for you guys when you're thinking about designing sort of insurance products like this, but which, from the one hand, you're able to offer a sort of like your own design layer on top for every product, which is really nice and really great for the filtering of those sort of forms and things. But do you find that there is do you find that there's not the ability to leverage the trust of some of the incumbent sort of insurers that you're using or something like that? Is that not something that you would think about including? Or do you find that, you're keeping the journey as sort of purely designed as possible is the best thing for that?
Yeah, I think like the decision is quite intentional here, because we believe that we can like fix kind of a broken experience, because like, as I mentioned earlier, people, they usually don't have a good time like when doing insurance in a way. So I think, but this still is from time to time a bit of a problem, because like under the hood, definitely we have these different carriers, and people, like when they go through claim scenarios, for example, they will get in touch with the carrier. I think this is something where we still have a lot of air to the top. But still, it's I think the most important thing is that we can control the most part of the overall experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the other side of that being that this is a clean slate for the user. It's a new experience. It's not inhibited with previous sort of, bad experiences, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that too, what we really think is hard for consumers often is like, if you ask them, do you want a household contents policy with this carrier or that carrier? And I think this type of comparison is like super unfair to the consumer, because how could they possibly know that? It's like if I was buying a plane ticket and you asked me if I want a Boeing or Airbus. And it's like, do I really care about that? Or can you just like give me the right product? And so I think the approach we're taking is we definitely vet heavily kind of the products and the carriers that we partner with, and the benefits are included in the product. We look at in a very, very thorough way and try to pick the product for our target customers. And the idea is that, this is already kind of filtered for them, so they don't have to think about questions like that, because it's super complicated to begin with.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And this is actually what we do a lot when we design new products, because the carriers, they have their idea of how to sell the specific product, right? And we're always in the situation of pushing back and really trying to understand, is this really necessary, like this information that you're trying to get out of the customer? Yeah. And this is the way like we're trying to improve the whole thing.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So reducing the cognitive load there, I guess, is the big aim. Brilliant. And then, so just to move on to the final one, and I think this really nicely encapsulates what you're trying to talk about here as a whole. This is how we can empower the people around you, not just you yourself, to be insured. So in this sense, we are going to be taking a look at how we can add another person to a policy, but you've got this sort of as an empowerment tool there. So in the insurance here, I guess we've got the option to extend the coverage to a few different people there, and we've also got the sort of the qualified sort of people, I guess, that we can extend our coverage to. We're going to add an individual there, and then select from a pre-baked list of different relationships. Again, I'd imagine that this information is coming from the requirements from the insurer. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then we invite that member via email. So we've got this sort of carousel here, which nicely and neatly gives away a few benefits of inviting members to the platform. And yeah, really nice messaging there to say that we're caring for our loved ones by doing this, that this is inherently an act of love, the idea there. And then now we move over to the experience of the other person. So we've got there the notion of entering their email and verifying. And I guess the aim here might be to make getting onto the platform at this stage as easy as possible, and setting the password, entering a verification code. And I think we should be straight. Oh, we've got a little chat interface thing here, which is really playful. So just touching on this while we're here, and we'll go back to some of the other elements, but why, what was the purpose of getting this chat sort of like interface into play this early on in the journey?
Mm-hmm. This specific chatbot is the onboarding chatbot. So I said no in the demo, but you can ask her for like a walkthrough of the app and kind of each screen what it does. And
nice.
And
okay.
Basically, you mentioned the word concierge earlier, and that's kind of a spot on. Like we wanted to give some personality to our app, in a sense that you really feel like you have somebody there to be with you every step of the way.
Okay, cool. And so this is on the one hand, a way to extend, I would imagine it's a way to extend coverage, but it's also playing another really key product role here, which is operating on acting as an engine of growth. This is, there's nothing more dynamic or more effective in a marketing perspective than getting people who care about each other to extend access to a product based on that care. We've seen it with people like with Monzo over here in the UK. They use the golden ticket, the notion of like a little visual golden ticket to share with your friends to say, look, you are one of the lucky ones now. You get access to this product as a real, and it was a really powerful tool for them in growing their early user base. How do you think about this? Do you think of it as doing two jobs in that way, or is there anything else that we're missing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those features that really gets back to the core of trying to bridge the gap between insurance and people. Yeah. When we talk to our customers about what kind of things they really care about, of course, the people around them is usually a top thing. Now, the thing that's really kind of unfortunate in insurance traditionally is that the policyholder, which is the person who happens to have their name on the piece of paper, is somehow more important than the others. And the experience that then gets created around insurances is such that the policyholder is the one who does the dealing with the insurance. And this is really interesting because a lot of insurance contracts actually cover multiple people. Like as you saw in that specific example, your partner, your spouse, your kids, even parents who live with you are all covered under the same contents policy. And when we kind of realize this, we kind of put the two and two together. It's like, well, people care about their loved ones. You talk to new parents, talk about how their life changed when they have their kids, because all of a sudden, I don't care if I'm in trouble, but I would do anything and pay any amount of money to keep my kids, safe, right? And I think that's a really interesting shift in kind of helping us think about what our product should do, which is that oftentimes for people, it's other people matter to me more than I matter to me. And so the feature that we've built basically is the idea that in cases where a policy covers a group of people, getting them involved with the experience of the insurance should be something similar to adding somebody to your WhatsApp group, right? It should be this natural thing. It doesn't cost you anything. You're already paying for the group to be covered. And so why should we limit the experience to just the policyholder? And so we wanted to make this really, really easy and really intuitive. And it's probably one of the first times I think in my career where we do usability studies, and adding a step to a buying funnel actively made the satisfaction go up, right? Because people are like, oh, I feel so much safer knowing that, my kids' names are actually on the contract. And this was super interesting, I think, from like a design and product perspective. And you mentioned growth earlier. Yes, of course, the hope is that, the more engagement you have with your users and the people around them, the more chances there are for more to expanding the user base. And I think we have a somewhat limited rollout of the feature now, and we have some really early successes. And I think a feature like this makes a lot of sense for us, given the holistic strategy. For example, in Germany, we have products that cover a group of people, like contents in this case, as well as products that only cover an individual. So for example, a bike insurance policy, right? And so in Germany, we're starting to see things like, people who buy a contents policy, add their loved ones and invite them to the app, and then that loved ones go and like buy a bike policy, let's say. And so sort of in our limited rollout, we're seeing that the revenue per app user can actually increase by up to 20% if we got enough adoption of the feature, right? And this is a fairly significant thing because, in insurance, we call it GWP, which is gross written premium, like spending on an annual basis per user. This is a very, very important metric in insurance. And if you can increase this just by like organically expanding the experience across your existing customer base, this is something that I'm not sure many insurance companies can say they can do. And so we're very interested in this feature and the early signals we've gotten there, and probably will invest more in it this year.
Nice. And David, just to tie this back to the rebranding, how to what extent is something like this born out of the approach that you've taken to the rebranding, or does this inform that, or were they developed in tandem? How has that gone about? Because this seems very much tied to that.
Yeah, and I think this also ties back into what I mentioned earlier about, like, we felt that we had a lot of good things going already. We just had to communicate it better and bind it into like the overall experience and strategy. And so actually, the whole network policy sharing idea was, like, I think it's already almost a year old, I'd say. Okay. And it definitely informed the whole rebranding process, because like when we started the process, we looked back on what we have already and what ideas we tinkered with in the past. And this definitely was one of the like strongest parts where we said, hey, yeah, this is like what we really want to do. And this really is empowerment, and people can feel it, right? Because I think Patrick mentioned it during the buying flows, people really are excited about, hey, oh, this is super handy. I mean, otherwise, because like when you look at traditional ways to cover your peers, like you have to call your insurance agent or fill out forms, and I think this is just like the better experience.
Yeah, for sure. So would it be fair to say that this is one of the core things that drove the sort of the reapproach to your branding and that sort of thing? That with this feature in mind?
I would more say it's the sum of things, because yes, it's definitely a strong part of it, but at the same time, we have this feature to claim your damages in the app, and this is also like as empowering as inviting your people, because you're doing it on your own, the same as making your buying decision. We're enabling people to make a better buying decision. And like you see, like there's a pattern with us enabling people for doing different jobs within this area.
Yeah, for sure. Great. And so a few final questions before we wrap up. The first one is, I can see you've obviously achieved quite a lot this year, and you must be really happy with that progress so far. But for the rest of 2020, all things aside, I'm not sure how it is over there in Germany compared to here in the UK with the lockdown. But have you got substantial plans going forward for the year, and how are you feeling about those?
I think 2020 is going to be a very exciting year for us. Of course, with the pandemic, everybody's a little bit affected. We're very fortunate in the sense that we're trying to drive digital transformation for an entire industry, and so of course, the product itself is digital as well. And I think our business is doing relatively well, and I don't think we've seen any significant changes to kind of our traction throughout the pandemic. We were originally planning on raising Series B this year, and I think because of that, it's going to have to be probably later in the year rather than earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. But the nice thing is, because of our traction, our investors are very bullish on where we are, and I think excited to keep supporting us. So very thankful for that as well. I think for the year, we're going to keep going what we're doing, expanding the product portfolio, deepening our kind of experiences, and differentiating ourselves with our new brand from all the other companies out there in our space, and just really, really going after that holistic experience, and continue growing for the rest of the year.
Anything for you, David?
For me, it's quite exciting, because we also took the chance of the whole rebranding process to establish a more functional design system, which really elevates how we build products during the upcoming time. And I think like for the past year, we were more in the mode of like experimenting fast, and even though if we knew that the experience or the visuals or whatever could be better, but now like we talk the same language between product design and development, and this will accelerate the processes in general. And
Perfect. Well, David, Patrick, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to meet you both. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Homescreen, diving straight into some of the more detailed analysis of products that we've got on the platform, and also trying to understand a little bit more about how those products are put together. If you want to find out a little bit more about the product that underpins this show, Pulse, then please go to pulse.11fs.com. You can find us on Twitter at 11fspulse, and you can also get us on email, pulse@11fs.com, to find out a little bit more about how we can help you to understand how the designs that affect products around the world are being made right now and what really ties them all together in terms of impact. Next week we'll be back with another episode, so keep your eyes peeled out for that, and we'll see you then.